For years, it's been one of the only issues Republicans and Democrats in Washington have seemed to agree upon.
I am asking both parties to come together to give us safe, fast, reliable, and modern infrastructure.
So far, not much has come of it. But now?
Building infrastructure of America has never been a partisan issue, and we hope to go forward in a very nonpartisan way.
There was goodwill in this meeting.
After a recent meeting with the president, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said they and Trump focused on a $2 trillion infrastructure package. While both parties appear optimistic, there's one pesky detail. Where will the money come from? But even before that's ironed out, local leaders are working to bring some of that funding back home to Massachusetts.
We come at this from different points of view. We represent different parties, but on this issue, we think there's work to be done and that the federal government needs to step up and be part of the solution.
Last week, Governor Charlie Baker, a Republican, and Boston Mayor Marty Walsh, a Democrat, went to Washington together to meet with congressional and federal officials, including U.S. Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao. Mayor Walsh joins me now. Hello, Mr. Mayor. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So I have to say, I love the bipartisan optics, but did anything come of this joint venture here?
Down there, a lot of the Republicans and senators we met with say that this is great, keep doing this stuff, because nothing's moving here in Washington. And what came of it was that pretty much what you just reported. They're looking at a $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion bill. This week, they're supposed to have discussions at the White House to talk about how to pay for it. From what I understand, the president is open to some types of increases in taxes or something to be creative. But they're going to have to come up with probably $500 million, at least up front, to pay for this long-time bill.
Speaking of coming up with money, sitting in those two chairs about a week ago were the two Transportation Committee chairs in the legislature, House and Senate. Yep. Both said we need new taxes to pay for transportation. Your traveling buddy, the governor, said no, at least for now, he is saying. Who's right in this, Mr. Mayor?
I think you need taxes. You're going to need to raise a revenue somewhere. When I was in the legislature, we raised the gas tax. We indexed it. If that wasn't returned over by the voters, reverted back, you'd have hundreds of millions of dollars every year to pay.
That ballot repeal was led by the governor
when he was running for governor, and I think that would allow the opportunity to pay down debt on some of the bonding that you're doing. And I think what you have to do is make a case of the people. And I think one of the biggest issues I hear every day is transportation, is traffic. And I think if people realize, if they see an investment going into something that's actually benefiting them and cutting back on it, it'll be something they support.
Am I reading too much into those couple of words that come after the comma the last few times from the governor, which says, I don't see a need for revenue now, for now?
Well, I think you have to talk to him. I think he's looking at an $8 billion investment in the MBTA that he's doing through bonding. But at some point, if Washington doesn't act in a significant transportation infrastructure bill, and you have to move the city and the state forward, we're going to have to come up with revenue to pay for it if we don't have a partner in Washington in paying for that. And that's just one issue. Housing is another issue that Washington is not part of right now. So those are big ticket items that we have to in the city. We have to figure out how to pay for it through our budget.
You ever had a conversation with him, a private conversation about the need for taxes and transportation?
Not about raising taxes. I've mentioned a little bit in the past. We've had little back and forth. We've never had a real conversation. We've never had a conversation, I should say, about taxes.
There was a report in the Boston Globe about a week or so ago that less than 1% of the city's contracts out of $664 million went to women or minority-run businesses. What are you doing about that?
We have more work to do. We're looking at the number now. I think the number is a little north of 1%, but it's still a bad number. It's not a good number. We're sitting down today. John Barris had some meetings, and we're sitting down to really think about how do we encourage people to bid on the city work, how do we make sure they're part of it. Not all of the work. Some people said that I have control of all the $600 million. You don't. There's bid laws, and some of this, one example is the school bus contract. It's worth about $120 million a year. We have two companies that bid on it. There's not a third. They're both owned by white people. So some of this is the bench isn't deep, but some of it, that's not an excuse. We have to do better.
Speaking of excuse, you mentioned John Barris, your economic development guy. The quote in the Globe that I read is from Barris, the willingness to contract is there, the number of contractors is not. It sort of sounds like what we used to hear, I'd love to hire some black people, but there aren't any people who are qualified.
In this particular case, that's a problem, and that's a big problem. And I think that, I think it's two things. Number one, we say they're not available. I don't think it's companies that understand the access to these contracts either. So it's not just simply not having companies there. There are companies there, but how do we bring them over to us to say, this is how you access these contracts. This is how you get on the bid laws. This is how you get on the list. We have to do a better job as a city to get that people.
Speaking of equity, you can go to, obviously, also a recent story, 13% of the cops in the city women.
Yeah.
1% of the firefighters are women.
Yeah.
How do you address those? Obviously, those numbers aren't acceptable
I mean,
to you, I assume.
no, they're not. We're addressing them with the police department. We have the cadet program, and I think 50% of all of, or mostly all of our cadets that were put on in the last 3 years are women. Those folks will go on to the police department eventually. And the fire department, we're working, trying to create opportunities, trying to create a cadet program, get a vote to the council, up to the legislature, but also go out and recruit veterans, women, veterans, and veterans of color to take the police and fire test. That's another way of getting on.
How frustrated are you by these kinds of things about race and gender?
It's not frustrating, but it seems like we should be so much further along in 2019, and we're still dealing with the issues. You know, we're dealing with pay equity issues in the city. We're dealing with issues of transportation, housing, education, and then we get a story like that. It kind of sets it all back, and it kind of, I don't want to say it deflates us, but it's kind of like we do all this work, and then you get a report that only 1% of the contracts are given to people and women of color. That hurts.
Is any of this your fault?
I mean, I'm sure it's all of our faults. I think it's
you, not all of ours.
I mean, is it my fault? I don't know. I'm the mayor of Boston, so I'm going to get the blame for it anyway.
Well, I was about to say you just picked a superintendent. I guess that relates to my question. The school committee just picked a superintendent, Brenda Caselius. Here she is on GBH's Morning Edition on May 2nd.
I'm just so very excited to really help lead the district into a place where there is very good trusting relationships and where people feel heard and valued and that their voices are valued at the table, and to work with the mayor and leveraging resources for children in Boston.
I think my question was a Freudian slip. I mean, you're criticized by some for not allowing your superintendents enough independence. Is that a fair criticism?
No.
Why not?
I mean, because I was criticized for giving them too much independence by the same paper, for, a year and a half
Which
before.
Which paper would that be?
I'm just not going to say. Figure it out.
Okay.
I mean, listen, there's a relationship there, and I think that, I was on a show earlier with the superintendent, and I don't micromanage the superintendent on inclusion, ELL, on education. That's not my place, and I empower the people around me to do their job, and I expect them to do their job. And when there's opportunities where I have to interject myself, I will, but I also want to know what's going on in the district, because on the good stuff, which I hope is all good stuff, I don't hear about that. On the bad stuff, people often criticize the city.
I heard a rumor over the weekend that Laura Perillo, who was the interim superintendent, took her out of the running, is about to be hired by you, essentially to oversee the schools.
Yeah, that's a lot of rumors.
Is that true?
No, it's not true.
She's about to go to work for you?
I don't know about that, but that's not true. There's nobody that oversees the schools. The person that oversees the schools is Superintendent Brenda Caselius.
Is she about to come to work for you, though?
I don't know. We haven't talked about what her next role is. Okay. Honest to God, we haven't. And the person who ran the school district before her was Tommy Chang. There was nobody that oversaw Tommy Chang or John McDonough, for that matter.
One of the most important things happening on the school front, you pledged in your first campaign in 2013, universal pre-K. Yeah. You said recently, was it the State of the City when you said this? Or recently you announced there'll be $15 million, and within X number of years we'll finally see every 4-year-old in an affordable, decent pre-K deal.
Not decent, high quality.
And how real is
Big
that?
difference. It's real. I mean, it's real. And when we looked at our universal pre-kindergarten, we want to make sure high quality is the benchmark. So when they're in a private nonprofit setting or they're in our public school system, they're getting the same type of education. It has to be high quality. It can't just be universal pre-kindergarten. There's a big difference between universal pre-kindergarten and high quality pre-kindergarten.
So do you have a date yet on which you're going to be endorsing Joe Biden? You don't have a specific date?
I'm focused on the budget.
In a moment of serious, I mean, you were so close to Biden. He attempted to call you to congratulate you, right? Called the wrong Marty Walsh.
Yeah, called my cousin. Marty Walsh. Called a couple of Marty Walshes.
I understand it's difficult in this situation. You're a mayor of a major American city. You are endorsing Joe Biden.
I was down in Washington the other day, and I was sitting next to Senator Warren. She was sitting next to me. We talked. We didn't talk about the presidency. We were talking about the infrastructure bill. So again, I'm going to make my decision at some point in the future.
When's the last time you spoke to Joe Biden?
Probably a few weeks ago.
And what was that conversation like?
He was just letting me know that he's getting ready to announce his candidacy for president.
And what'd you say to him?
Good luck.
What are the odds you think that you'll end up endorsing Joe? I mean, with all due respect, I mean, you're going to be sitting here in a couple of months, and I'm going to say to you, why didn't you say that you're going to endorse him?
I'm just focused right now, and I'm focused on the Bruins winning the Stanley Cup.
Who is a Democrat best situated to defeat Donald Trump in your estimation?
I actually think there are, and I've said this to you on the radio, I believe, I think there are 3 candidates that I see right now today that could go in the final against Donald Trump and energize the base. And I think one is Joe Biden. one is Kamala Harris, and the other one is Elizabeth Warren. I think that they're different type of bases within the party. The other candidates, I don't take away from them. Mayor Pete's a good candidate. He's doing a good job. Cory Booker's running a good race. But I do think that those three have a story to tell.
You didn't mention the mayor from New York.
Oh, yeah. He just got in the other day. I don't think he's officially in yet. My friend Bill.
You know, you mentioned pay equity a couple of minutes ago, and you mentioned Kamala Harris. She announced over the weekend this plan to deal with pay equity, which I know is something you've spent a lot of energy on in your time as mayor, saying essentially, if I am president of the United States, Kamala Harris, there'll be a law that requires that every year major companies certify that they have pay equity, and if not, there'll be government fines, 1% for every 1% off there is. Would you support something like that?
Yeah, I think before you go there, though, you have to get the information where the companies are in pay equity, and we have a bill at the State House right now that I supported the other day that would have requirements in reporting salaries for corporations. I think you have to see what the problem really is. We all know there's a problem, and I think you almost have to go one company at a time, not throughout the United States of America, but you really have to dive into the information to see how big the disparity is in individual companies.
But once you've done the diving, if the disparity continues, 80 cents on a dollar, 61 cents on a dollar for black women, 53 cents on a dollar for Latino women.
It hurts our economy. I mean, there's no.
Is there a role for government, though?
I think to some degree there is, but then the people are going to look in the non-union world versus the union world. Is there a role for government there? I mean, union wages are the same for whether you're a woman or a man, and non-union plays differently. I just think that if that's too much on government, but I definitely think that we're leading the country here. We have 250 companies in Boston that give us information, anonymous information on the pay of their employees, and we're dissecting it. And I know a lot of them are working at creating a better environment and equal pay for equal work.
Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it. Mayor Marty Walsh.